this could be a very long war. So this is what we are seeing now. Thank you so much for letting me know that I was not on the stream. Right. So that is what is going to happen. But we are seeing a lot of important development in terms of the war on Venezuela and what that means for the Caribbean region. Very important that we understand that. Now we know that Trinidad is one of the major players in this war, the war on Venezuela, right? So that Trinidad is on, has not hidden its face in terms of where it stands on the war. We understand that Mrs. Kamla Persad-Bissessar is with the war. She's not hiding it. She is very, very strident that she is on board with the U.S. policy or policies of the drug war that Donald Trump is waging. No, so that is very important that we understand that. Now, the other Caribbean islands are suggesting that we live in a zone of peace and not in a zone of war. That is what they are suggesting, that we're not living in this war zone as the other people would like, as Kamla Persad-Bissessar is saying of Trinidad. She's saying that we don't live in a zone of peace. That is what Kamla is saying, while others are suggesting in the Caribbean that we do live in a zone of peace. Now, what is it? And why aren't the Caribbean, community united as they should be, as they normally, are? Now, it doesn't seem as if we have, an absolute answer to that question, because that is what they do. They are here to deceive as much as we're seeing. We don't know who's siding with whom, but we do know that Kamla Persad-Bissessar is on the side of the United States. Seeing here from the political newspaper that Trump's would not mind having Nicolás Maduro go into what we call exile. He would like to see the likes of Maduro exiled. That is Trump. Okay, so that is what is going to happen with Trump. He thinks that if he exiles Nicolás Maduro, that means therefore that will solve the problem. So we're seeing an article coming out of the Political. Trump's don't call it a day after plan for Venezuela. Now, so we have Venezuela dictator Nicolás Maduro and his closest aides should consider reading up on Turkey. Some Trump administration officials are talking about exiling them there, unless they agree to go to Russia or another place, or maybe Cuba. But I don't know if they would want them to go to Cuba, because if Nicolás Maduro should be toppled, if he should be deposed from office, the United States, it seems, want to send him, I should say, maybe send him over to would want to topple the government of Cuba, or would want to topple the government of Nicaragua also, right? So that I don't think, based on what I am researching, my research, it doesn't seem as if the government of Nicolás Maduro, if he's toppled, will move to Cuba. That is not going to be something that is possible, and it would not be a practical thing to do, as Rubio wants to topple the government of Cuba and also the government of Nicaragua as well. So very important that we understand that. So I would think that Turkey perhaps would be a better place for him to go. Maybe Russia also, if Putin would like to have him there. But that's the latest that Trump is trying to do. He's trying to exile the government of Nicolás Maduro, since he sees that perhaps the war is going to be much more challenging. We woke up this morning also to see another story coming out that there is another warship that the United States has removed from the Caribbean back to its port. So it means, therefore, that it could be some positive sign that Trump is not necessarily very confident about this war against Nicolás Maduro, and that this war could be stopped, could be halted based on the challenges that Trump and Washington are facing at the moment. So I think that the war might be something that will not happen in light of what we're seeing. But if Trump is suggesting that he wants to have some backdoor dialogue with Nicolás Maduro. And here the political is saying that they're thinking of exiling him to Turkey, all right, or to Russia. It means, therefore, that there could be some arrangement. We don't know if Nicolás Maduro will agree to that arrangement of going to Turkey or being exiled in Russia. What we do know is that the United States has a history of that. As I said in one of my videos this morning, I was saying that the president of the Dominican Republic, the former president, which was Trujillo, that was Rafael Trujillo, he was actually, well, the United States wanted him to be exiled in Spain before they actually took him out, right? Because we know that he was unalived by the CIA eventually, but they wanted him. The records, the history tells us that the United States wanted to exile him to Spain, right? And he could have taken his bank accounts, his assets, everything, but he decided that, just like Nicolás Maduro, he would not give in to United States wishes. Now that the United States is pressuring Maduro to be exiled, will he do that? Will Nicolás Maduro exile himself? Do you think, ladies and gentlemen, that Nicolás Maduro will exile himself to another country, or do you think he will stand up to U.S. machinations and U.S. hegemonic power? That is something that is very interesting. Now, they say giving Maduro and his confidants safe passage to another country is one idea aides to President Donald Trump are mulling as they consider what to do with Venezuela if they succeed in toppling the strong man, according to a U.S. official and two other people familiar with the discussions. Others are suggesting placing Maduro under arrest and putting him on trial in the U.S., a third person familiar with the talks told me. After all, the ongoing Trump military operation in the Caribbean isn't officially about regime change in Venezuela. The administration said it's fighting terrorist drug cartels in the region, and Maduro is already under U.S. indictment on drug charges, allegations he denies. Some Trump aides are hoping that the threats of U.S. military action alone spur chaos in Maduro's regime and cause him to lose his grip on power. Now, do you think that will ever happen? Do you think the whole matter of the fact that they are threatening him with all of these war assets and military equipment in the Caribbean, do you think that they will frighten him and that he will eventually exile himself to another country? They're suggesting Russia or Turkey or Cuba, but I doubt Cuba, because I think Nicolás Maduro is on board of wanting to see the likes of Cuba. He would also, if the regime of Venezuela is toppled, he is going to be going after the Cuba. He's going to be going after the Cubans next, and then afterwards the Nicaraguan government. That is for sure. I think that is the agenda that many political commentators are suggesting that will happen. Now, when we look at the case of Trinidad and Tobago, we see that they are suggesting that, crime and violence is on the uptick in Trinidad, and therefore, Kamla is suggesting that she has to support President Trump because they're thinking that the government of Nicolás Maduro is involved in drug trafficking, human trafficking, gun running, and all of the such like, even though the UN reports are suggesting that he is not. But we are seeing that the government, the administration of Trinidad, the current government is suggesting that he is, and that they are collaborating with the United States to remove the government, to have regime change in Venezuela. Yet still, Kamla is suggesting that she is not working with the U.S. to depose the government of Nicolás Maduro to bring about regime change in Venezuela. So we don't know what to believe. What is she suggesting? What does she even believe that she's doing? It doesn't seem, because one thing she's saying that, yes, crime and violence and drug trafficking are real in Trinidad, which is true. We can't deny the fact that those realities are also true. However, she can't have her cake at the same time and eat it when she's suggesting that, wow, we are not here collaborating with the United States to topple the government of Maduro, but we're working with them with their anti-drug laws, when we know that the United States is suggesting that Maduro is, aligned with the Tren de Aragua and also with the Carteles de los Soles, which is the cartels of the sun. That is what they're suggesting. But Kamla is suggesting that yes, she is aware of that, but she's saying that she is not collaborating with the U.S. to have regime change in Venezuela. Now, I don't know how true that can be, and I think that is a height of hypocrisy, right? I think that is a height of hypocrisy. Now, the United States, we know that Mexico, for example, Ecuador, Colombia, and but particular Ecuador and Mexico are the routes or the routes through which the fentanyl and the cocaine travel to the United States and also the Pacific Ocean. Yet the United States is emphasizing Venezuela and seeking to topple the regime of Venezuela. Even though we must say that in recent times, I was seeing yesterday where Trump was suggesting that he's also going after Mexico because he says he doesn't like how the Mexicans are behaving, because he's saying that they too are problematic in terms of the war on drugs. And that was because there were some not teenagers, but Generation Z. They were protesting in downtown Mexico recently about the government and the government's, what should I say now, performance so far. And that sort of sparked Trump's attention. He captured his attention, and he's saying that Mexico is a problem. And people were asking him, would you bomb Mexico? And he's saying that he's not going to discard that. So it seems to me that the entire Latin American region and Caribbean region are caught up in this struggle, in this warfare, and the United States seeks full spectrum dominance in the region and desires to militarize the region, as it were. All right, so this is what we're seeing. Now, how are we reacting? How are our Caribbean leaders reacting to, and how are we as citizens reacting to this U.S. domination? Now, I must say, as we know, we don't have to repeat Kamla's, her reaction, that she is fully on board and she wants to see gun trafficking, and she is fully on board with Trump. In terms of the other leaders, they are reacting in the sense that they're saying that we're a zone of peace and they do not want the United States to convert us into a zone of war. But can we just say that we just don't want to be a zone, or we want to live in a zone of peace, we don't want to live in a zone of war? But what are we doing to live in that zone of peace? Can we just have our boats be indiscriminately shot at and think that, okay, we're going to live in a zone of peace? Or are we seeking to look at the root cause of drug trafficking and human trafficking and gun running in the region? So far, we're also waking up to seeing news in Haiti, in which there are reports there in Haiti that the gangs under Jimmy Cherizier, who is the leader in Haiti, he is suggesting to the citizens of the Haitians, that they ought to shelter in homes and not to come out, because there is a big now conflict between the security forces of Haiti and also the international security forces and the Haitian gangs. Now, how is that going to help the Haitian populace when they can't come out to work? Right? Many of them are those who sell on the streets, and that is how they earn their living. Now, if they can't come out because they're scared that they might be shot at, what is going to happen to that society? And these are some of the things that we have to look at. Now, what are the causes of drug trafficking or the gangsterism that we're seeing in Haiti? Who is causing it? And are the Haitian populace, is the Haitian populace responsible for gun running, gun trafficking, and gangsterism in Haiti? Now, these are the things that we have to ask. But suddenly we're seeing our leaders playing this mighty role and almost sanctimonious role. They're behaving as if they are innocent and the entire populace are the ones who are problematic, right? And that is what we are seeing now happening in the Caribbean region. Now, what do we think? What is your reaction? Those of you who are watching, what are your reaction? What is your reaction to this war? What do you think about the war on drugs? Do you think that it is hypocritical? And what are the hypocrisies that we need to expose in light of this war? What do you think, ladies and gentlemen? Do you think that this is a legitimate war that the United States government, under the presidency of Donald Trump, is waging, and that the Caribbean should collaborate with him in a quest, quest to eradicate totally drug running, human trafficking, and the high crime rate that we're witnessing in the Caribbean, because all of these are interconnected. Gangsterism, drug running, human trafficking, all of them result in a high crime and murder rate. How do you think we're going to solve this? And do you think that if we collaborate with Donald Trump and Washington, that they will be able to just clean us up, to clean the region up of drug trafficking, human trafficking, and all of the likes that we are, and the high crime rate that we are experiencing in the different Caribbean territories? Now, we know that also the Dominican Republic is very instrumental, right, and playing a significant role in helping Trump. Yes, good evening, good new daughter. Welcome to the live. Now, we are suggesting, do you think that if we collaborate, I was asking new daughter, if we collaborate with Trump, if he is going to be able to help us to clean up gun running, drug trafficking, and the likes in the Caribbean, because it's a problem. And even in Jamaica, where we're seeing gangsterism, we hear that Andrew Holness is saying that he is going to be waging a war on the gangs. All right. So your daughter is saying absolutely not. Absolutely. And I agree with her, because what should we be doing, new daughter and others? What should we be looking at? How are we going to solve the problem of gun running, drug trafficking, human trafficking? Because we are not talking about human trafficking, but that's a big thing in the Caribbean, even with our children going missing. And we see that in Jamaica. We see it in places like Trinidad, and the abduction of people gone missing, and people don't know, where they go, and people don't ever see their family after they've gone missing. Some are sacrificed. We do know that, because I remember it was last year when a girl in Jamaica, a very young teenager, was sacrificed and she was buried. So we know that these are problems. So we can't say that now that they're not problems. We know they're problems, but how do we solve these problems? Can America help us to solve these problems, or are they contributing to the problems that we are facing here? New Daughter is saying he's asking the people to consent to attacking and colonizing our space. Absolutely. So it's not the fact that he wants to help us. It's the how. It is the methodology that he is using to actually solve the problem. And we're saying, no, what we do need to do, we need to come together as a region. For example, as I was suggesting yesterday on a live, that during the United Nations meeting, the General Assembly that was held some weeks ago, that if Trump was serious about solving gun running and human trafficking and drugs, also drug trafficking, he would have engaged. He would have invited Nicolás Maduro to the General Assembly, and they would have engaged each other in terms of how they would come at some form of solution, right, to eradicating drug trafficking and all the other problems that we face here in the Caribbean. But it cannot be that Trump and the United States is just going to say, oh, these presidents and prime ministers are a part of drug cartels and they need to be indicted. No, because we also have to look at our laws. Trump also has to, respect our domestic laws in the Caribbean as well as international law, right? Which he obviously does. He does not respect, and this is what people are suggesting, that if he's going to help us, he must show some respect to the laws that we have in the Caribbean, in our respective Caribbean countries, right? And this is what we're saying. Now, what are we going to do as citizens? How are we reacting to Trump's military aggression? Because we're seeing the largest, carrier, the largest military asset, the USS Gerald R. Ford in the Caribbean. Now, Akil is saying that USA contributes to all of these illegal trades. Yes. And that is what we, the Caribbean, should be telling them, that we do know that you are the major, first of all, they are the major what? the demand, the supply, they are the ones who demand the drugs. A lot of Americans are on drugs, and it's almost like they can't live without it. And we know that during the 1960s and even the 1950s, that the CIA was responsible for drug running around the world, not only in the Caribbean, in Latin America, but around the world, in the Middle East, and even in Japan. As far as Japan, we know that the United States was involved. That's what history tells us, in drug trafficking, because it is a multi-million-dollar industry. So even human trafficking and also gun running. So that is also something that we need to highlight. New Daughter says, not the US. I agree that we should create an inter-Caribbean task force. Yes. Now, how do we create this inter-Caribbean task force? What do we do with that? Do we have all the Caribbean islands, and do we come together and say, what are the factors? One of the things I saw that is missing, we have not yet engaged. I haven't seen Trump engaging sociologists, the criminologists, and all of these people who should be able to be voices in terms of what are the contributing factors to these, problems that we encounter here. I haven't seen him done that so far. Yes, the supply of the guns, we know the U.S. supplies the guns. That is what we know. These are basic things. But do you think that the United States is acting hypocritically? Yes, she is. Right? The fact that, as New Daughter and other people and all, we have been suggesting that the United States, one, the demand is high there. Right, so that's why the supply is being given. The market in the United States, the drug trafficking is going there because they have a high demand for drugs. The same thing for the gun running. We know the United States is the manufacturer of guns. Okay, the largest manufacturer of guns in the world. So they need a market, and the market is the Caribbean. And if you have drug trafficking, then you're going to need also gun running to protect the trade. So we're seeing where there is an interconnection between drug trafficking and also gun trafficking. Okay, and that is what we're seeing in Haiti, in Jamaica, in Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the Caribbean region. But there seems to be, what we call cognitive dissonance among our politicians, where they're turning a blind eye on what the oligarchs are doing, right? Those who control the finances, those who control government, and they're looking at what the man on the street, okay, is doing. And they would rather turn a blind eye, and then they say, we're going to wage a war on the populace, and they take away our rights or civil liberties. And then we say, wow, yes, we have to cower in fear because our prime ministers and our governments want to help us. And that is not true. Because if they really wanted to help us, all of what we're saying are known facts. And then they could now, they could register these facts to the United States, advance these facts, and let them know, and probably advance solutions of how they can collaborate with the United States government to eradicate and to minimize. We will never eradicate these things. And let me just say that we're living in a world that is not perfect, right? Where human beings have flaws. So we know that many of the problems that we see, including poverty, will never be totally eradicated. Let us say the government was a good government and wanted to eradicate poverty. There are some people who suffer from poverty of the mind. And no matter what you do, we know that we have families in Jamaica, for example, and other parts of the Caribbean, right? And no matter what you do to help them, you try your best to help them, but they decide that they want to live the life that they're living. Right? And so there are times when you might have a good government and might be doing all that is humanly possible for them to uplift their citizen or their citizenry, but they don't want to be elevated. They don't want to be uplifted. So what happens? What happens eventually? It results in the fact that they will remain in poverty all the days of their lives. Right? So this is what we're suggesting here. We are not suggesting that the government is going to be able to fully eradicate. And that's what I can't be in agreement with Trump when he's talking about eradicating drug running freely. It's not going to happen. It's not going to result in the total eradication of these maladies. Yes, involvement of the criminologists and other professionals This is alongside members of the police from all Caribbean countries. They must be armed, trained in the area of drug and gun trafficking, right, and running. Now, that is true. But what about the fact of education? Don't we need, and we're not talking about also moral values. What role does education play in this eradication? Well, there can't be an eradication, but in this minimization, right, of gun running and human trafficking, and also, drug trafficking in the region. What role? Because we don't talk about morality anymore. All we talk about, when the government is, having an iron fist, right, and doing and behaving like a strong man, and taking away our civil rights. These are the only solutions that we think we need to have to solving some of these social maladies. But what about if we grow our values and attitudes, as we heard Mr. PJ Patterson speaking about years ago in Jamaica, for example? We're not talking about these things anymore. Where are our values? Okay, and what role do values and morals and ethics play in our human society? I could never, for example, and I'm not saying that, I never say never, but it's really unlike me to be holding a gun at somebody's head to shoot them. I would never do that. I don't have that sort of, my values don't permit me to do that, right? Gun running and also human trafficking and also drug trafficking. I could never do that because my values do not push me to do these things, to participate in these, nefarious activities. Okay, so when we're thinking that we're just going to, arrest people, and have all of these very strong armed policies, iron fisted policies, do we think that these are going to work when we're just going to, imbibe the fear of God in people's hearts? Is that what we want? Are they're short term? Yeah, they might be effective for short term solutions, but are they going to result in long term solutions to solving the problem of gun trafficking, crime and violence, and so forth? No, no, no. Now, how can we educate our citizens? Let us begin with education, because that's also a very important aspect of this gun running and drug trafficking. But you might say that there are lots of educated people who are involved, right? And that is the irony, that there are lots of educated people who are involved. Akil is saying, Carter is saying that I agree with you, Sir Andrew. I could never take a gun and some money to go terrorize my own people, because that is not my morals or values. Absolutely. Just couldn't do it. And this is what we have to teach our young children from young. But do you know that the children who are killing, well, those who have grown up and they're now probably teenagers into young adults, and they're actually unaliving people, that is the values that they grew up seeing, right? They grew up seeing those, they're probably their parents or their cousins or their nieces or other neighbors doing that, and that's why they think it is normal. But you and I think, Akil, that it is not normal to unalive somebody. It's not normal to be participating in a drug, whatever. Or it's not normal to participate in human trafficking or human sacrifice. Those things you and I cannot do. But when we look at the underbelly of our society, we are seeing that some of our politicians and some of our oligarchs or economic oligarchs are engaged in these nefarious activities. And people have been calling them out. And that's why we're seeing the CIA is involved in drug running. And many people think that the US government is so innocent. So when they say that they're having covert actions and whatever, it means therefore the United States is going to go after these people. And when they apprehend them and they convict them, then we're going to be safe and sound and secure in our home. And that is not true. And how do we how do we separate ourselves from these illusions that people have in their heads? Well, Akil Carter is saying, well, the education has to be anti-European, anti-Euro-American capitalism. Now, that's a very good point you're raising. Should we be anti-capitalism, though? Or do you think that capitalism serves its purpose, but it's not the the capitalism, the neoliberal capitalism, that's the word I'm using, the neoliberal capitalism, and let me write that in the box, in the chat here, neoliberal capitalism that we are seeing that Washington is actually dispersing to the world. But what capitalism in and of itself, is it bad? Let me hear from you guys. Do you think capitalism in and of itself is a bad idea? Or do you think that it has to do with the way how we are, we treat capitalism, how it functions in our society? Is it just for a few, the wealth for a few, as opposed to the impoverishment of the masses? Remember now that we have different forms of capitalism. Okay, so the neoliberal capitalism that we are looking at now is not the capitalism that we should be instituting. For example, what do they practice in China? They have what you call a state form of capitalism, where the government ensures that private companies do not run roughshod over the people. So in China, for example, how many people has China lifted out of poverty over the years? Many, hundreds of thousands, right? Now, how could China, that, recently, maybe in the 1970s, was just like a poor house, if you will, how were they able to lift all of those people out of poverty? You let me know. Let me know, how was China able to lift all of those people out of poverty, yet the United States is not able to do it? New Daughter is saying that capitalism does not seem to be working for us. Very bad idea, because it doesn't fit our society or culture. Okay, so if capitalism doesn't fit it, what do we do? Yes, so we have Akil Carter saying, yes, the neoliberal capitalism that is detrimental to our societies and environments. Absolutely. Now, if it's not capitalism, ladies and gentlemen, if it's not capitalism that we are going to use, what would be our economic model? Because, we can't just say bye-bye to capitalism. All right, but we have to say, what are we replacing capitalism with? As some people are saying, democracy doesn't work, right? Lots of people are now suggesting that in Latin America, democracy is not working for us. But is it democracy? Is it a problem with democracy? Or is it a problem with the brand of democracy that we are practicing within the region? That is what we have to ask ourselves. Do you think is something inherently wrong with capitalism, or is there something inherently wrong with democracy? Or is it something that is the brand of capitalism, or is it the brand of democracy that we are practicing in the region? Let me see what Akil. Yeah, what do you think? Do you think that we should get rid of capitalism? And if let's begin with capitalism. And what do we replace capitalism with? What should we replace with socialism, with anarchism? What would we replace it with? With communism? Let me know what we think, because we are the ones who have to make the recommendations, because we can't rely now on our politicians, because they are on board with the neoliberal brand of capitalism. Socialism. Okay, so we have here New Daughter is saying socialism. Now, how is socialism going to help us? Because how do we make money with socialism? Because I know that in Europe, where you are perhaps, New Daughter, in England, that they practice some form of what we call now socialism, but it's also mixed with capitalism. It is what we call eclectic system, right? It is not a system that is pure socialism, right? Because they do practice, in fact, they have some form of neoliberal capitalism in England, only that they also merge it with socialistic policies. So Akil is also saying that we should replace capitalism with socialism. But how do we make money if we replace it with that? Or should we have an eclectic system of democratic socialism, as what Michael Manley was suggesting? Because Michael Manley, in the 1970s in Jamaica, he was not just suggesting that we should just be fully socialist, right? What he was anticipating was that we would merge it, having a capital socialistic model, where, yes, we make money, but we can't have these foreign investors just come to the country and muzzle the funds from Jamaica, and they go and they leave us without anything. Whatever profits that they make, we must be getting a good percentage of the profit so that we can, invest in education, we can invest in healthcare, and we can also do some infrastructure development and investment, right? But what we're seeing now, very good. The eclectic democratic socialism appears to be the most appropriate, right? I agree with that. I don't think any pure version of any of these economic philosophies is good. I think that there need to be eclectic, always having some merger, that when you make money, so let us say we have now some industries in Jamaica. After they've made their billions of dollars, they should be investing in the building of schools, in the building of hospitals. The Chinese, for example, are making billions in Jamaica and in the Caribbean and the region. How much are they giving back to building the infrastructure? Well, we know they build roads, but we are the ones who pay for it. We pay for the tolls, we pay for the debt. So when I hear people coming and saying, "Oh, the Chinese, they're paying and all of that," I'm like, okay, but how much are they paying? Right? So we have to reassess what these people are doing, and it's government, just like what Michael Manley did. He challenged the bauxite company during his time, and other American and European investment companies, right, who were making billions of dollars. He says, no, you have to invest in Jamaica. And that is why he was able to have the free education for some time in Jamaica, because the proceeds of the profits went into building the infrastructure. Yes, a new daughter is saying a combination could work given how women create wealth in markets, for example. Absolutely. Absolutely. A combination. That is what we need to have. We need to have a combination of all of these systems. And that's why I'm not an anti-capitalist. I'm not an anti-socialist. I say all of these things have their purposes. I don't think the pure form of capitalism works. I don't think the pure form of socialism works. I think that if we are honest with ourselves, that we will come together and say that we need segments of some of these. Just like, for example, democracy. You and I know that we love to live in democracy. You and I love our freedoms, don't we? Absolutely. But there are times when you have to say to people, it can't be done. You can't have democracy. Let us say, for example, the hurricane that we just had in Jamaica. There was a program that I was listening to with Muta Baruka, and he had a gentleman that he was arguing with about the people who had built their homes right on the beach, right on the river lakes and the river band, and their houses just came tumbling down because of the hurricane. So he was saying that the government was not responsible because the government had told them that they should not build their homes there, and they went and they built their homes there, and hence they got what they got. The effects of the storm, collapsing their homes. That is what serves them right. But that is, what not. If you really want to protect your people, sometimes you have to protect them in a way that say you can't do it and enforce the laws, right? The laws have to be enforced. And even though people might, and so what Mutabuka was saying, what if the people should say that the government is behaving in a dictatorial manner? No, it's to save lives, right? So the government had said, no, we are going to, bulldoze those houses, but we're going to build out of some money we're getting from the NHT. We're going to build homes for you. And I've seen it in the DR. For example, in the DR, you had recently homes like those that we have in Jamaica, in these areas, very shantytown areas. The government went there into those communities. He bulldozed all of the homes in the communities. And then you know what he did? He actually built homes for them. Right? He built homes of apartment complexes for them so that people could relocate, that when they had hurricanes or any natural disasters, that they could be in a safer community, right? We don't see where our government is doing that. They just tell us that, okay, yes, and they allow the people to do whatever they want to do, and then eventually we find ourselves in the position that so sometimes we do need some form of dictatorship, not in the sense that they're going to be hardcore, but the government says this is what has to be done and it must be done, and citizens have to accede to this request because it's saving lives, just like the traffic lights, right? If you go past the traffic light, then you can be fined, okay, because you can end up killing people if you just cross the the traffic light when the light says stop. Now we don't need a capitalism that robs the land and its people. Absolutely. And this is where we're talking now, Akil, socialism with some amount of moral values. With some amount of moral values. If our politicians had morality and they had moral values, they would know that they can't just steal people's lands right from them. Look at what happened during the NHT in Jamaica, the National Housing Trust. During the IMF agreement, we're still there with them. But when they first came to Jamaica in 2013, when we entered an agreement with them, they took how much of our money? I think to date, the IMF has taken about $14 billion from Jamaica, saying that it's lowering our debt. At the same time, who really need that money? The Jamaicans who don't have a house today. They're the ones who contributed to the fund of the NHT being so wealthy. And yet still, many of them, the government cannot build free homes for them. They're just building one home. And like during the election, you saw Andrew Holness going around the entire country giving a house or there, one or two homes to people, as if that is something Jamaicans should be happy about. Yeah, we're happy for the person who got a home. We're not going to knock him for doing that, but it should be on a wider scale because it's a rich institution and many of these oligarchs are making billions out of the houses that are out of the fund, from the fund that they have there, the huge monies that are in the NHT. So we have a combination. Yes, New Daughter is saying, I realize that many people simply do not have it, but a small percentage of salaries could go towards healthcare like England, for example. And they have it, New Daughter, they have it. I've always said, when you see the government of Jamaica doing things, there are some times when it goes out of its way to do something that it wants to do, it shows that they have money, right? But when they don't want to do something, they don't do it. And that is what, when you look at the amount of money they put into Grand Gala, right? The billions of dollars they put into these things. And if they should put something into a school fund to feed our children, many children can't go to school because they don't have lunch money. What if we should have a school feeding program which Jamaica could take some of the money out of the NHT, because many of our people are not going to get homes, right? And we are contributing to it. So if they were to tell our people, our parents, that we're taking some of the money out of the funds to feed our children and to bus them to school every day, I think that parents would not be in disagreement with that, because guess what? At the end of the day, many of them are not going to get any homes but anyway, So if their children are being educated from the funds, yeah, so much better. Right. We should have some healthcare. Well, we do have healthcare for all to an extent, New Daughter. The GLP did they implemented that under Bruce Golding, but it's not effective because they're not able to, what should I say now, particularly after the IMF agreement in 2013, they have not been able to fund it. They don't have enough wiggle room to fund the free healthcare. So what we have now is a deteriorated healthcare infrastructure where there's no money to keep and to replenish that which is old and that which needs renewal. So that is what we have in Jamaica at the moment. So we need to have the maintenance. When we're trying to now have the socialism principle, we need to see how we can replenish that which is old and to maintain things that have collapsed. Agree about protections for the local people. Land protection is an excellent idea. Yes, we need to enforce the laws, and the government needs to go around the country now and look at where people are setting up homes which make them more vulnerable if you should have hurricanes or whatever natural disaster passes through. But the government also has to find some way of building homes. But when I look at the box house that they're building for Jamaicans, and they're charging them $19 million, $20 million, do you think that those box houses are reasonable? Are reasonable priced? I don't think so. Yeah, so no, Sir Andrew, the Jamaican people will vote against any form of socialism. They call these programs government handouts. Yeah, that is you know what happened, Akil? That is the oligarchs who fool the masses into believing that, right? It is, but do you know that what I say, Akil, is that the government practices socialism, but socialism for whom? For the wealthy, right? So when you look at Donald Trump, for example, and all of these, the Raytheons and all these military, what contractors that get billions of dollars every year to make guns and to bombs and all these things to unalive people, the government literally gives them your money to do it, and they make billions of dollars from doing that, from unaliving people, right? So do you think they worked for the money? No, they didn't earn the money. They didn't earn the money. So socialism for the wealthy. But when it comes down to socialism for the masses, for the poor people, for the middle and the working classes, they're telling us that this government handouts. But the government is handing out money to the wealthy people. And that is what we have to understand. And that's what I always tell the people who say, oh, we can't give all these government handouts. I say, but we do for the wealthy, including the politicians, right? Including, let's not talk about the politicians who have access to our monies, right? And they just use it to do whatever they want to do with it, to enrich their families, to enrich their friends, to enrich their colleagues. So we have now to wake up to understand that sometimes when they're using these barbs against us and saying that, oh, we don't want socialism because it's just giving out to poor people and they're going to become, dependent on the state. But the wealthy, I say, well, the billionaires are dependent on the state. The billionaires, and that is the irony of it all. They tell us, oh no, the billionaires worked hard for their money. Many of them don't, right? It's paper money that they're getting. The IMF, another arm of the US hit squad, absolutely. And how are we now, new daughter? Because I have created many videos on my Rumination News Network channel on the IMF. And Jamaicans just don't think that the IMF is a bad institution. They think that they're there as debt collectors. And after the debt has been collected, then we are going to go back into prosperity. Is that true? No. But I think the lack of education, again, we have to educate our people. But what I'm realizing, your daughter and Akil and all of you on the live, make sure you're liking the live and you're sharing the live. I think that many of our people don't want to be educated. And that is where now the rubber hits the road. The rubber hits the road in which most of our people do not want to be educated. They prefer to follow the masses. And that is what Akil, they will say, oh yes, it's government handouts. But who is telling you that? Who is telling you that it's government handout when you give to the poor? Okay? The elites, because they want it. They want that which you should give to the poor, that it goes into their coffers. And that is what happens. Yes, Akil Carter is saying, yes, socialism for the wealthy couldn't be said any better. Absolutely. That is what it's about. That's what crony capitalism is now. In fact, there is no much difference between capitalism and socialism. If people don't understand that, it comes from the same source. But it's how it is managed, right? And that the monies, as we're saying, goes towards the rich, and they practice capitalism at the highest echelon of society, while we have to pay for their wealth, right? And then they bark at us and tell us that, oh, we are the ones who are getting up early in the mornings and we're making sacrifices to set up all these businesses, when it is not true. Do you know that in the United States, before all of this crony capitalism, it was the middle class who made America very wealthy, right? It's not the elites. It's not Bill Gates. It's not the Elon Musks that they're brandishing and behaving as if these people are important to our economies, and if we don't have them, then we're not going to have a successful economy. That is not true. That is not true. But that is the message that they have passed on to us. And we believe them. We believe them. And that is what really, really surprises me, that we believe them to our own detriment, right? To our own detriment. And then we are the ones who are going to wind up having to pay the what should I say now, to suffer, because they get the money, right? They get the money, and then we are impoverished. And who do they take the money from? From the middle class, from the working man, and from the middle class. And that is what is happening in America at the moment. and people can't see that. This morning, I also read an article from the Politico in which they were saying that actually what they're doing, they are now the people in the tech industry, in the America's tech industry, are suggesting to Donald Trump that national security should be prioritized and that the use of their technology is what should be prioritized to secure people, to make people safe. So the government needs to give them billions of dollars per year so that they can invest in their technologies so that they can keep us safe. Do you see the irony there? And this is what we call socialism. So, technically speaking, many of the so-called capitalistic societies practice socialism. They do practice capitalism for capitalism too, crony capitalism, but they now siphon off the monies to the wealthy, to the upper class, and then they tell us that they are the ones who are fundamentally important in the sustenance of our society, when it is not true. Okay? Now, we have to, education definitely needed. Absolutely. Yes, it's definitely needed. But how are we willing to accept it? That is what we need to do. Are we willing to accept education? Or have we become so materialistic and have we lost the values that we are no longer interested in educating ourselves? Gone are the days when our parents wanted to educate us. I remember my father was an educated person, but if he came home and never saw us in school, it was going to be a big thing, right? Because even though he wasn't educated, you know what he would do sometimes too? When we thought we would hide from school, and he would know, because my father was a truck driver and he would drive throughout the length and breadth of Jamaica. When we thought that he did not know that we were in school or we weren't in school, well, he thought that we were thinking he thought we were in school, he would go at school. After school is finished, he would go to see if we're there. And it would be a problem if we weren't there. And sometimes we weren't there, and it was a problem, right? Because parents then, were more interested, and they sought to ensure that their children were educated, and they wanted them to have certain values. Remember when you went to high school too, there was the language that you spoke, even though they could not speak a word of English, but they would say, wow, may I send you to school and you not speak English? Right? You just speak patois. Where are the values? Right now we're seeing where we're encouraging even our high school students who have access to, education, and they can learn English properly. We are encouraging them to speak Creole. Right? And how are they going to be helped? How are they going to interact with the international community if they aren't able to speak standard English? And if we do not force them to do that? This is another thing we have to do. We are a society. We can't say that this is all everybody can do, to each his own, speak whatever language you want to speak. Then you isolate the community. You isolate us. Let us say, for example, we had a hurricane recently, right? International people from the international media houses were there, and they were communicating with some of our people, and some of our people could not communicate in good English, right? And if they want help and they can't communicate what they want, how they want the help, how are they going to get the help? Right? And these are the things we have to understand. I'm not saying now that we should discriminate against those people who don't have education, they don't have the ability to speak English and so forth. But for those individuals who have the ability, and the government should give the people, or the majority of the people, the opportunity to educate themselves so that they can communicate basic communication skills, that they can communicate with anybody around the world who speaks English. Right? But what we have in Jamaica is that the majority of our people aren't able to communicate. Let us say that you have a house that has been demolished and somebody's there who wants to help you to rebuild, but they're asking you what are some of the items in the house. And some of our people, they can communicate in the Creole, but they can't really communicate in English. So you're going to go on, whatever, unless a person is willing to move with you and to sort of be patient with you. But let me say something. We have our government, and the way how we think our society should be, and the way we think about freedom, and that we can just do whatever we want to do. Anarchy is not what freedom is all about. It's not what freedom is all about. And that is what we have to do. The government has to say to Jamaicans, education is necessary. And I don't want to see any child on the road. And if there's a child on the road at such and such a time, this, I'm going to find the parents, because this is what we have to do if we want to become fully developed. But we have some people who, among us, educated people, who will say the government is behaving very badly and behaving like a dictator, like an autocrat, when that's not, well, yes, in that sense, dictatorship is necessary. To say that parents should send their children to school, and if they are not in school, then you're going to have consequences. That is necessary. Just like at home, when our parents tell us that we're free with them, but there are certain rules that we cannot break. These are rules, and they have to be enforced, and they must be obeyed. Right? And this is what we're saying. And the same thing goes for drug running. The same thing goes for drug trafficking. If we have law and order in our society, some of these problems can be minimized. I repeat that. Apart from education, apart from morality and religious values and ethics, or whatever you have, some of the problems of gun running, of gun trafficking, and human trafficking can be remedied if law and order are enforced in our societies. Okay? And I know that in Jamaica, for example, there is a lack of law and order. There's too much social disorder. So when you see the disorder and the chaos, people can do what they do. They can abduct children, they can do their drug trafficking and their human trafficking, because you don't have the police, you don't have the law enforcement people to enforce the laws, right? And these are some of the things that we have. These are some of the short-term things that we have to do. We can't just kill people. I'm not saying here that we just should go and take up the gun and unalive them, okay? But we have to, if we are suspicious of them, then they ought to be taken to a court. And maybe because we don't have the resources to build courthouses in some of our Caribbean islands, we need to have mobile courthouses where people can, if we hold them suspicious, if we have any suspicion rather that they are guilty, then we bring them to these mobile courthouses where they are tried, and if they are charged and convicted, then so let it be. But we can't agree with Trump in terms of just unaliving them. No, that is not what we should be doing. And if Trump were thinking, and if Trump really wants to, minimize on gun trafficking, that is what he could do. Look at all of this large military assets that he sent to the Caribbean. What if he were to send us some mobile courts and say, as soon as we see these people, we apprehend them, send them to a legal court where they're tried, okay, and then we would be able to decipher whether they are guilty or not. And people can see, because the more people see that the laws are being enforced, it will scare them. Do you know that even the Bible says that the pastors should tell people of their sins to scare them, sometimes to say and to show them the consequences that will happen as a result of their sins. The same thing for the law. If you tell people that these are the things that will happen if you don't obey the laws, and they can see that people are suffering the consequences, it will induce them not to do it. But if they are seeing that they can get away with it, then they're going to do it. And that is what we're seeing in the Caribbean region. Too much chaos. We need law and order. The daughter is saying, but I totally believe that we can do this for ourselves, because in truth, Trump will create too much chaos. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying that he should be. I'm just saying if he were really, new daughter, I would just say if he were really serious, that is what, if he were genuine, that's the word I wanted to use. If he were sincere about reducing gun trafficking and all of the maladies that he's talking about, then he would have sent us these mobile courts and other things. Right? Invest in schools, invest in what you call these remedial centers where we can apprehend these people, right? And then we can help them, we can give them therapy, right? But that's what we don't have. When you look at what is happening in Jamaica now, ladies and gentlemen, the fact that these people have been completely devastated, right? It is going to result in much more after things the roads are cleared and everything goes back to at least some semblance of order. You're going to have more killings, more crime, because people don't have anything, right? And the government doesn't seem prepared to be able to resuscitate the economy, to be able for the people to get back on track. And many of them have lost everything that they've ever owned, including the market women. What about people who go used to sell and they had their wares and all of the stuff gone, gone, right? And very few people, maybe a few family members here and there, will help them. But you can rest assured the government is not going to have the money to help them, right? So what's going to happen? Drugs, gun running, human trafficking, perhaps, right? Because this is what you're forcing people into doing. And you really wonder if, because we know that some of these entities like the CIA, the government, are involved in some of these things, if they are creating the environment, engineering the environment for these people to find themselves so desperate, so destitute, that they have no other recourse but to do that, to be engaged in such activities. What do you think? It could be. We don't know, right? But this is what is very, very terrible. It bothers me to see that they're talking about drug running and gun trafficking in a time when many people don't have the wherewithal in the United States too. Look at the other day, people are without food in the richest country in the world. Jamaica is a poor country, but we're talking about a rich country in the world. And people were trying to navigate the whole matter of the SNAP program and the fact that Trump he wanted to suspend it, right? And they are without food. Yet Trump is spending $18 million per day for these military assets to be in the Caribbean. $18 million per day. Now, who is getting that money? Who do you think is getting the $18 million per day? Whom do you think are profiting from the war efforts? The Raytheons and all of these military contractors. They're the ones profiting from the debacle that we're seeing in the southern Caribbean seas. Okay? While people are going to be, paralyzed economically, socially, physically, and in all spheres of their lives because of what they're seeing and what might happen. We hope it doesn't happen. We hope that a full-fledged war doesn't happen, doesn't break out. But if it ever happens, it is going to send ripple effects across the Caribbean in every facet of our lives, economically, socially, psychologically, physically, right? Just about in every facet. And then what's going to happen? More drug running, more guns trafficking, more all of the social maladies that we're talking about, right? And the IMF, as you're saying, your new daughter, IMF helps the US government to keep us in debt and poverty. Why is it we do not have more manufacturing business creating or job creating? Remember that's what they did first. The first thing, new daughter, is in the 1990s, when Jamaica did have, not an excellent, but we did have a manufacturing sector before the FinSacs debacle, right? And the government literally destroyed that sort of industry and infrastructure, sold it over to Trinidad and other people, but Trinidad was the one that went over to Trinidad, and then Jamaica just became a service-oriented economy, right? And then the IMF now has to come in, has to re-engineer our society and keep us in debt forever. But as you're saying, new daughter, if you don't have manufacturing industry, we can't pay down our debt and live in a prosperous manner. Jamaica has not had not even 2 years of economic prosperity since our independence. Do you know that? Trinidad has had their economic prosperity, right? Barbados has had their economic prosperity, right? Jamaica has not had not even 2 years. Even when they're telling us in the 1960s that our economy was growing at a rapid rate, but the majority of Jamaicans were not prosperous. So we have never had a period of even 2 years of economic prosperity where we could say the majority of our populace were actually surviving well. We're not saying being wealthy, but being able to survive well. And society looks like it's growing, good infrastructure, buildings going up, right? You know, law and order being maintained. Okay, we've never seen that. And that's a problem. That's a problem. Now we're saying what is happening to us by yes, what is happening us to us is by design. This is what it is. They never wanted Jamaica to grow, just like Haiti. They've never wanted Jamaica to grow. And these are some of the hypocrisies that we are exposing on this live. And what is very interesting, is that many people would rather go on to other chats and other lives to hear about some gossips that is happening. They don't want to hear what we're saying here that is substantive. That this is something that is happening, that our governments are not doing what we send them to office to do. Jamaicans trust the UK and the King. Maybe a change is needed. Now, this is something that we have been talking about also on the chat, in which the government wants to send us to a republic, to convert us into a republic. But is a republic going to help us if the United States has its hands over us? What do you think, guys? Do you think a republic is going to change our economic status? Do you think the removal, let us say we become a republic tomorrow, like to Barbados, and if the governor general is removed from office and we replace him with a president, a Jamaican domestic president, do you think that our lot is going to change? Or do you think that is just some superficial dressing, window dressing as it were, and our lives are not going to change in any significant way? What do you think? I don't think our lives are going to change. Our lives are going to change if we remove the king as our head. Because I think that after Jamaica became independence in 1962, that the United States became our new overseers, our new overlords. So the IMF, the World Bank, all these multilateral institutions, and that is why Manley, if you don't believe me, when Manley stood up to what many of the foreign investors who were United States citizens and United States companies, what did they do? The CIA went down there and created mayhem. Okay? Because the United States runs the show. Right? And so the fact that we had a governor general and we can say that we are a constitutional monarchy didn't mean anything. Right? The UK couldn't do anything when the United States was destabilizing Jamaica. Notice that when we were colonies of England, that the United States actually invaded other countries in the region, but not us. Have you ever noticed that? That during all the time when we were UK colony, a colony of the UK, that Jamaica and the other British colonies were never invaded. Haiti was, the DR was, many other countries were in the region. Nicaragua many times, Honduras many times, Brazil many times, but Jamaica and the British colonies were never, former British colonies I should say, were never invaded because the US understood that at least the UK was in charge at the time. After they got up and they left and they say they're leaving us to be independent, they didn't care. The US could now invade, and like what they did to Jamaica and Grenada, right? And they did it. That should tell us something. So we have here New Daughter saying Jamaican, we trust the UK, but I think we trust now, New Daughter, the United States, who is our new overseer or new overlords. And just like Kamla Persad-Bissessar, we have to do that which they tell us to do. Or if we don't, then they can ask for regime change, or they can create a lot of spat like they did in 2010 in Jamaica too, when they wanted Chris to do coke. Let's not forget that the drug wars was also under Obama, right? And when they wanted Christopher to cook, and Bruce Golding said to them that their surveillance activities, did not coincide, did not align with our domestic laws. They said, we want him anyway. And what's his name, Bruce Golding? Well, many people will say Bruce Golding was a part of he was a member of the constituency that's Cook. But at the same time, the laws were the laws too. But the United States was suggesting that, look here, I want him irrespective of what your laws say. And eventually, we know what happened. The rest is history, that Bruce Golding was actually removed. He was asked to step down, which he did under Obama. Sought regime change in Jamaica. But thankfully, Bruce Golding did it quietly. When I say quietly, he did not remonstrate, right? He did not rebel against U.S. wishes when they asked him to step down. Nicolás Maduro is, right? And that is why they are going after him. Okay? So the fact that we are thinking that the UK government, but let us even remember that many papers have been written, including in the UK Telegraph and also the UK Guardian, asking, is the UK the 51st state of the United States? UK doesn't even run the show anymore. Okay? So we have new daughter. We are very much open to manipulation from the Western world powers. Yeah, because this is a new world order. Remember now that empires come and go, and Britain lost its empire in 1955. The French lost its empire way back when, right? And the Dutch and the other empires. So you have successive empires that come after they have gone, and they have to submit to the reigning empire. And the global reigning empire today, as we speak, is the United States of America. And whether or not Great Britain wishes to accept it, she has to do, and Germany too, and Spain too, and all of them have to do the bidding of the United States of America. Okay? And that's what we have. So if they are doing it, and they are much more powerful nations than we are, right? What could we say? In fact, the United States was a former colony of Great Britain, right? And that's the irony too. The United States, I repeat, was a former colony of Great Britain. And right now, it's the other way around, right? And this is how the irony of history, we don't know what twist, and turns that history might take. And that is why we have to be very careful. But at this point in time, King Charles is only a ceremonial position, right? He's really not in charge of Jamaica and has nothing to do with anything we do there, right? It's more the United States that has more to do with us, because he that pays the pipes, he that pays the piper calls the tune, something of the sort, the expression there, right? And the United States is the one that gives us all this money for aid and for IMF and all of that stuff, these loans, right? So they control us more, and we are in their backyard, as it were, as they've told us. And I've told you again, and I will repeat it, we have never been invaded, Jamaica, before we became independent, when we were once British colony. But as soon as we gave up that status of being a British colony, we can be invaded by the United States, which they have, well, not invaded, they have destabilized us, and they have invaded country like Grenada. Okay? So these are some of the hypocrisies that we have to look at carefully, and we have to move on. History is not static, right? History is not static. It evolves. And we have to evolve with the times. And so we know that, yes, once Britain was powerful, it controlled Jamaica and Trinidad and all of these, Barbados and all of these other countries in the Caribbean. But now it is not their time. Their time has gone. In fact, China is even more powerful than Great Britain, right? If we want to speak the truth, China is now much more of a greater world power, right? A more superior world power than Great Britain is, right? Do you see how history can be something of great importance? And we should study. and we should follow its pages, and we should be able to connect the dots to what is happening in our present lives, because it is real. History is real. It's not something that just passed yesterday. It is what we continue to live. We continue to live the pages of history in a different era, but the same framework and the same, what you say now, what you call it now, political realities and economic realities portend. We are living that, right? Yeah. Now, so how do we now begin to educate ourselves? Well, we have to find ourselves reading every day. Okay, we've got to read. There's no way around it. We've got to read. And I think that what is happening now too, what is dangerous, the podcasts are good in sometimes educating us, but we've got also to read. And some of them are good in terms of they suggest books, articles, journals that we can read and to empower ourselves. But others are just merely, filled with gossips. And I think for the large part, for the large portion of our Caribbean citizens, we follow a lot of gossips. Okay, we follow a lot of political gossips, and we are not looking at the political realities. And we listen to what we want to hear. And then after what we are hearing doesn't really align with the reality, we find ourselves in an awful predicament. In an awful predicament. For example, many people during the campaign by Andrew Holness were suggesting that we are living in a prosperous Jamaica, right? Jamaica is to the world, and we are prosperous. Jamaica has never been prosperous since its independence, or many years, Andrew Holness said, right? So why aren't we able to lift ourselves out of what is happening right now if we were that prosperous, right? If we were that prosperous. And Jamaica, I remember before the election too, was it last year? Before the election, way into the campaigning, oh, Jamaica's awash with money. Jamaica has all this cash, we're saying. And I'm like, where are they getting that money from? Where are they getting all of this cash from? And they couldn't say. Nobody could say where Jamaica was getting the money from. They're just repeating what they're hearing on the streets and what their politicians are saying to them. So where all those cash now that we should have to rebuild our communities? Where is that cash? Right? Where is the prosperity that Mr. Andrew Holness, Dr. Andrew Holness, I should say, where is the prosperity that of which he spoke that we should be having and now should be enjoying and using the proceeds of that prosperity to rebuild Jamaica? Where is it? Where is it? You tell me. I don't know. Okay, and these are some of the hypocrisies that we must begin to highlight and to discuss and to expose. Very important that we do that. Yeah, your daughter is saying aid needs to stop. Yeah, make them pay for resources properly and use the money to build the Caribbean countries by the way of manufacturing, but everything must be done like a socialist capitalist mixed. Yeah. But the thing about it, if who is calling the shots, new daughter? If they the ones in office were the ones calling the shots, if they were the ones formulating, crafting the policies, then I would say yeah, and great suggestion. But unfortunately, Andrew Holness, Kamla Persad-Bissessar, the mere mortals of Barbados are not crafting and forming the policies. Most of the major policies are formulated or crafted in Washington, D.C. Okay? And then they are exported to us, and they pretend as if they are the ones who are behind those agendas, or prime ministers and presidents. But they are not. And they know that. And the IMF certainly would not like to see Jamaica and the Caribbean at large having a firm manufacturing infrastructure. They wouldn't like to see that. Look at the United States. Look at the United States, which was the model of manufacturing country for many decades. And right now, it is also like a service-oriented economy, where all you have them doing now are making guns. And what do they produce? What does the United States produce? As a result of that, Many of its citizens are now impoverished. Many of its citizens in the United States are impoverished because the manufacturing base has been demolished. And that's why Trump was sent there for 2 terms, right? Because he lied to them and he told them that he was going to restore the manufacturing, infrastructure that was demolished by former presidents, but he hasn't done that. He hasn't done that, right? As a result of that, as a result of that, the people continue to suffer. And we can see now MAGA, his group, his base, a lot of them, the working class, are turning against him because they're saying, we sent you there to restore our jobs, and what you're doing, you are promoting wars. You are expanding on wars around the world. And wars cost huge amounts of money. As I told you, right there in the southern region there in Southcom, right? It costs the United States of America over $18 million to keep the warships right there in the southern seas, the southern waters. $18 million per day. Do you know what that could do? And probably one industry probably could start up, right? But that's not the United States' mission or agenda, to create a manufacturing base so that the people can be prosperous. That is not their agenda. Their agenda is to enslave, like they're doing to us, to enslave their own populace. And that is why Trump is now suggesting that the war has now come home. He has pivoted to Asia. He has pivoted to Asia, and the war is now home. And the war is not only a social war, a physical war. It's psychological, it's economic, it's political warfare. Okay? And that's what we have to understand. So they are waging a war on our economics, on our pocketbooks, on our economic resources, on our lands, on our assets. A war is being waged. And many of our Caribbean citizens have not yet woken up to the fact that that is what is happening. Right? They just think that there's a war with Maduro about some drugs, oh yeah, and regime change, and they're going to take him out of office and everything is going to be all right. Okay? That is what we think. That is what we think. And if that ever happens, we hope it doesn't happen, and we lose everything, and they change the banking laws, and they change all of what we know should be normal. Okay? Then we are going to find that what we thought is not what is. Okay? And that is what we have to understand. But how many of our Caribbean citizens are willing to confront the realities, though they be bothersome and grave realities? They don't want to do that. They just want to say, oh yeah, crime and violence is high, so we have to have the United States help us to reduce it. Boom, it's reduced and we are going to go back to our normal lives. Didn't we hear that during the pandemic? That if you take the whatever, okay, then things are going to go back to normal. And since the pandemic, we realize that our lives have not been normal. We have some amount of normalcy. Don't get me wrong. We have returned to some semblance of normalcy, but the normalcy that we enjoy previous to the pandemic is not the same world we're living in. Right? It's not the same world we're living in. And the same way is going to happen too if there's a war in Venezuela. We are not going to wake up to a similar world that we're living in at the moment. And this is what we have to understand. And many of us are just not trying to grasp it. Right? And I'll preach until YouTube decides I won't be here anymore. But it's important for you to understand that this is no ordinary time. We're not living in a world where, it's a world in which things are going to return. The people live in the Middle East. They have not returned to normalcy. In Iraq, in Syria, they have not returned to normalcy. In Libya. Okay, so why would we think that we're different and something is special about us? Okay, we have to look at history and we have to follow the trends of history to understand where we are in our times. Now, do you have any questions before we end our live? We can go for a few more minutes Do you have any questions, any comments? For those, and make sure you're liking the live, you're sharing the live, so that other people can join the live. So it would be nice if we could have a live frequently, because it's good for discussion. But not many of you are showing up for the live, and we need to have. I think it was my apologies. I think yesterday I should have been on the live, and I forgot. I don't know how I forgot the live yesterday, but I'm happy that I was able to join today. Now, yeah. So, any questions? Any comments on what we have been discussing, or something that is on your mind that you would like to share with us? It could be something totally different from the topic, but something that you have on your mind. Or if you want me to deal with a topic, you can suggest the topic. Also, you can also write it in the chat to be discussed in a future live. Any other? Okay, so we have Akil Cortez saying, you had a video with a young woman guest, Professor. Yes, Professor. Yeah, I've been trying to get her back on the program, but she's really busy. I have her WhatsApp number and so on. So I'll try to get her back as soon as she can. She was really good. Right. I enjoyed that session. Can you try to arrange for us to? Yes, I would like to do that. If she comes back though on the live, normally I take her on my Rumination News Network, because this is not my biggest channel, and there are more people on my lives on the Rumination News Network. So I would prefer for her to be there on the Rumination Net. So I will let you know, for those of you who are on this live, whenever I get her back, whenever she can be on another live, I will let you know, and you can join my Rumination News Network channel for that live. Yes, Akil, she's a very, very good commentator, and also professor. New daughter is saying, do you know why they haven't yet done to us what they did to Libya? Well, that's what they're doing in you mean to Jamaica? Are you saying to Jamaica? Well, they won't do to us what they've done to Libya if we follow if we follow their requests, right? If we heed their wishes. So if it's Andrew Holness you're talking about, new daughter, they're not going to do to Jamaica what they did to Libya, because the reason why they did to Libya what they did was because Gaddafi stood up to them, and he said he wanted to change the US dollar. He didn't want to use the US dollar as the international reserve currency. He wanted to unite Africa. He wanted to join the BRICS nations and all of that stuff. And the United States didn't like that. So they, just like what they're doing in Venezuela, that's the same thing they did to what's his name, to Gaddafi. Okay, so that's what we're facing now here in the Caribbean region, that the United States want to make and Libyas. He wants to create Libyas. The United States wants to create Libyas in the Caribbean, where if the government of the Caribbean and Latin America do not accede to U.S. wishes and demands, they can be, you know what, they can be Libya'd, if you will. Right? They can become another Libya. Okay? So that's what we need to understand. So that's why we have not become any Libya at the moment. We're not there yet, because we are aligning ourselves with their policies, right? And we're not courageous, as it were, to stand up to the Goliath of the North. Now, any other question? Any other comment? Any other suggestion for a live topic? For our next live, what would you want me to discuss? Any other comment? Questions? Can we have a show on de-dollarization? Yes, that would be a very good. Yes, that would be a great show. The thing about it though is that many people don't like lives with de-dollarization, right? If you say something about economics, they're like, oh, I'm off. I'm on to another show talking about war and something else. But that's a very interesting topic to talk about, the de-dollarization. But how do we do it when we are enmeshed in the global order, right? And it would be very difficult to de-dollarize when Jamaica has signed on to treaties of which it cannot extricate itself. It would be very difficult to do that at this time. We could join something like BRICS, but again, the United States is going to threaten us also if we join the BRICS. Because the United States' purpose is also to weaponize its currency against us. And that's why we're saying that Libya, when they wanted to move away from the dollar, the US said no. And they did what they did. right? So it's going to be a tall hill. It's going to be an uphill battle if we decide to do that, and it can result in very terrible consequences for Jamaica's economy and for the nation as a whole. Yeah. Any other question? But we could look at that topic and discuss it because it's something that should be discussed. And many people think that we can just change our currency tomorrow to something else and we'll be okay. New daughter is saying the fall of empire is something you have already done, but not necessarily with regards to the fall of the US dollar. Yeah, yeah. So in terms of that, oh, I think that's what you're telling me. So you're telling me not just de-dollarization of the Jamaican currency, but to look at the de-dollarization of the US as a reserve currency, US dollar as a reserve currency. Yeah, that would be a good topic. The US empire collapse and de-dollarization. Yeah, that could make for a very good um, live topic. Yes, yeah, yeah. I now understand perfectly what it was. I misunderstood you. Thought you mentioned we should de-dollarize as a country in Jamaica or Caribbean countries, and I was just saying that that would be very difficult to do. But a topic to talk about the fall of the United States and the fact that if it falls, the empire falls, then the whole currency is going to fall too. It's going to go down with it. Then yeah, something that we should definitely talk about, and we could look at it at this Sunday, this coming Sunday for our live show this Sunday. Any other question? We have here, there must be a path to freedom. Very good question. There has to be, but I think the greatest path would be the education of our minds and for citizens to understand that, new daughter, the things that we have and the freedom that we enjoy are sometimes enslaving us, right? So what we have been accustomed to, like our phones, and who are making these phones, and the gadgets that we have, who are making these little things that we have that titivate us, the same people that who are enslaving us. So if we don't get away from these things and begin to say that we have to create our own things to make ourselves comfortable, then I don't think we'll ever be free. And that's the conundrum that we face. New daughter, many of us are saying that we want to be free. At the same time, we are tied to a lot of the things and the people who make these things for us to experience some amount of joy and happiness. How do we how do we extricate ourselves from these people and from these gadgets? That's the question. So freedom is one, but how do we free our minds from these things? Right? Yeah. It's interesting if you study slavery, some of the slaves did not know when it was time, when some of the slaves were saying that we want to be free. Do you know that some of the slaves did not want to be free? Yeah. A lot of them did because they had become so accustomed to their slavery that they did not know how they would live independent lives. They were saying, who is going to take care of us? Right? At least, even though they were, worked to death. But the fact is that they had their meals and they could get the little, doctor's appointment, even though the doctor thing was terrible. The healthcare was horrible. And they would do some horrendous things to them. But they could not really envisage themselves living as free individuals because for years, that's all they knew. Right? And the same thing with us in our world today. For years, this is all we know. Right? So it means, therefore, that we do not want to extricate ourselves from these things. But if they fall, we fall. That is it. If they fall, we fall. Remember, we say if the United States catches a cold, we get what? Pneumonia. And that is true. If the United States falls tomorrow, we are going to fall too along with them. And we will be hit worse. Whenever they have like even a World War II, remember that we suffered more than these people. Yes, step forward, BRICS. What I think we need to have a live discussion on BRICS too, because we need to have an open discussion where we are expressing freely our ideas about BRICS, not just having locked into an idea about BRICS. Because let us got the BRICS nation: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Are these countries lovers of black people? Do they even love black people? How do they see us? Would they be willing to help us, or are they just trying to sound nice here? But if we should fall under their remit, that they would treat us worse than the Westerners. What do you think? When I go to Brazil, for example, yes, we need to do something on the BRICS. When I go to Brazil and you look at that Brazil is the most populated black country outside of Nigeria, right? And people don't know that. Many people don't know that, right? But yet Brazil is so anti-black, right? Brazil is so anti-black that it's just amazing to see the color divisions that they have in Brazil. It's almost like a caste system that you see in India. It is. It is a caste system in Brazil, right? If you go to South Africa, the same thing. India, evidently the caste system came from there, right? China, the same thing. They have a few blacks in China and they're probably doing well, so we can't use that as the example, the model. But what if they should be flocked by black people living in China? Would they treat us well? I doubt it. Would we be in their Congress or Parliament? I doubt it. So we need to have an open dialogue as Caribbean citizens, particularly those of us of color. If we would be accepted, well, they would accept us, yes, but they would they embrace us in the way we would like to be embraced and empower us the way in which we'd like to be empowered if we should be under that remit. New Daughter is saying, we, the Caribbean, fail to act as a black and are easily divided. Yes, we display virtually no loyalty to ourselves. That is why they don't respect us. And that is true. That is true to an extent. But it is also inherently true in them that black people are not, we are coming from descendants of, we're descendants of slaves. So they don't respect us. They think that inherently we are slaves, even though we're not. But because we are descendants of, they still treat us accordingly. That is still in their minds, That will never go. But as you're saying, New Daughter, we have to rise up. But we don't know if we can be under their banner. We can collaborate with them. We can have treaties with them, but in our favor. But to be under their remit, I don't think they're going to treat us very well. New Daughter is saying, yeah, why should they empower us? We must empower ourselves. Yeah, but we can empower ourselves. But the fact is, too, let us be practical, too. There are times you and I who are very educated and we might find ourselves under some, white leadership or maybe in China or wherever you are, and they treat you as if you're still not, even though you are superior to them in many ways, they still treat you as a descendant of slaves. Right? Don't they? Yes, they do still treat us. Even when you feel empowered and you think that you have all the tools, they try to still find ways. There's a black teacher, a Jamaican teacher. She lives in China, and she has a podcast with her, I think her African husband. Can't remember what country he's from in Africa, but she said something about China the other day on her podcast. She was saying that she loves China. Don't get me wrong, and she enjoys living in China. And I don't think she's going to go back to Jamaica anytime soon, right? She enjoys China. But she says one of the criticism she has about the country on the podcast is that as a teacher, because she's black, one, she's Jamaican, number two, she says when she goes to meetings, right, when they're having like teachers meetings and they're asking for suggestions, and even when she makes suggestions, that they don't want to listen to her. And when they ask her to edit something, like, because they're not native speakers of English, and she says, oh, sure, and she edits for them. Oh, are you sure? They'll come back. Are you sure it's properly edited? Are you whatever? And they're trying to undermine her, right? Even though she has checked it many times. If it were a white person, they would not do that with that white person, right? So even though she feels empowered, and she's confident, she knows what she's about, but these people are psychologically trying to destroy her by suggesting that, yes, you might be a teacher, you might be a native speaker of English, but you're not white, right? And that is what we are saying here. Now, New Daughter is saying they don't have to be to like our color, but it's business. Yeah, it's business, yes, and they do one of the things with the Chinese. That's what they care about. But in sometimes too, as I'm suggesting about this teacher, they do undermine you. They do undermine your professionalism. They do undermine your capacity as a person who is on equal footing and above, sometimes above them, if you allow them. But as you're saying, new daughter, if you allow them to, we have to be strong and we have to let them know. And the more we as a collective, I think that's what you're saying now to new daughter, as a collective, if we now begin to have the mentality of saying we are as equal or superior to you, then they will have no other way, but no other option, I should say, but to respect us. Right? So you're right. You're right, new daughter. We can't disagree. But I think it's just a few of us are showing that we are equal. We are your equals. And this is what not Michael Manley, but Marcus Garvey was trying to do. But we didn't allow him to accomplish that because we were not cooperative. Black people are not cooperative. And that is, we love slavery, if truth be told. We love to be on the banner of white people. Right? Do you know that since I've started these channels, that when I email, for example, a white professor to be on my live or to be on a program that I'm, recording, boom, yeah, he's there. When can I, or he or she's there? When can I be there? Oh, tomorrow at 5 o'clock. And they're asking, what do you need from me? It takes you days and running after this black professor, running after this black person to be on their live. Most of them don't respond. They don't respond to your emails. Yeah? This is the way, as a people, and I'm talking about black people who are educated, who are professors, but they have this they're wearing this, I don't know what they're wearing. Right? While you will see a white person willing to join the live, willing to come on your YouTube channel. Right? But if you're not having like 90 or 100,000 subscribers, that black person doesn't want to come because he's not going to be seen, and he wants to be seen by many people. The white person doesn't care. If you give him a platform to come and chat about a particular, topic, whatever topic that he's comfortable with, he or she's comfortable with, they will come. We, totally different. So this is what we're saying. We still are under the realm of slavery. We have the slave mentality, emancipate ourselves, as Marcus Garvey said, and was reinforced by Bob Marley. Emancipate. We need to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. And we find that in Jamaica, that is pronounced. And wherever we go across the Caribbean region, that mental slavery is still a part of our society. And that is why we are not able to become economically independent. The two are interconnected. They are Siamese twins. Economic independence and mental independence. Okay? Mentally, we are enslaved, and that is why we are still economically enslaved. Right? Any other comment? Any other question that we would like to ask? Yes, so I think, new daughter, your topic of the de-dollarization and the fall of the U.S. empire is something that should be discussed. And we can talk about BRICS, the fall of the U.S. empire, and de-dollarization. That would be an excellent show for Sunday. So I will start promoting it on my community and try to save the try to share, rather, when I send you out the promotion, try to share the live, even before we come on, so other people can join it. And because I think YouTube is trying to suppress the channel too, because of what I'm talking about, and they don't like the sensitive topics I'm talking about. So the algorithm tries as much as possible to suppress the channel, suppress the discourse. So you will be the ones who have to share, like up the lives, so that it can be dispensed to other people. Yeah. So your daughter is saying, yes, I agree. Mental freedom is a must. Yeah, because without it, as I'm suggesting, many of the slaves, new daughter, which is true, they could not fathom the meaning of freedom. Why are you fighting? Why do you want us to become free when we are slaves? We must respect massa. right? And the same thing we can't do without the IMF, we can't do without the World Bank, we can't do without the US dollar, right? And all of the institutions, the Western institutions, we can't do without them. That is what we say. But what did Marcus Garvey say? If the Westerners have a Harvard, black people must have a Harvard. If they have a ship, then we must have a ship, right? Of a similar or superior kind, right? But unfortunately, Marcus Garvey was a man of his, a superior man to all of us. He was just a unique person, I should say, right? A unique black man. You're not going to find a man of his ilk amongst maybe one in a billion, right? Maybe he is a 1 in a billion in the world, right? And imagine, New Daughter and all of you guys on the line, we have the greatest black man of the 20th century, right? The greatest black man. Some people say that has ever lived, but I won't say that. But we can say that he is or was the greatest black man of the 20th century. And look at how we treat him. Wouldn't you want to tell people about him? Wouldn't the Jamaican Tourist Board and all of that, shouldn't they be knowing about Marcus Garvey? And this is our philosopher, right? Our economic philosopher or political philosopher, right? Instead, it is is our athletes we want to be recognized by, right? Instead of economic philosophers, those who are trying to liberate us, the Michael Manleys. These are the persons we promote, or athletes. Jamaicans should just be noted for running and cool man, airy. We're an airy culture, right? Of some descendants of slaves. That's all we are. We're cool, airy, reggae, right? And nothing is wrong with these things. Nothing is absolutely. I'm not saying now that anything is wrong with reggae, dancehall, your Usain Bolt. Absolutely, they add a lot to our culture, right? And they help to promote our culture. But is that the end and sum total of who we are as a people? Will people respect us just for producing prodigious athletes and being able to sing some reggae tunes and all that, dancehall with whatever? No, they won't respect us for that. They'll enjoy it. They'll dance when they want to, come and jive and have a good time. But after they're finished with that, they're going back and saying, oh, that Jamaica is poor. They're begging people all around, begging me, and I can't stand. They're begging me all the time, right? And we are medicants. We are mendicants, and that is the whole thing. The IMF, the World Bank, we're just give me. And we're not producing, as New Daughter says, anything more than some athletes and some musicians. Our society cannot be built on those things. Can't. As important as they are, because culture is important, but a part of culture is also economics. A part of culture is also and should be economics, because that is the foundation on which we need to build, right? And Akil Carter is saying, I always said that we focus too much on cultural nationalism instead of labor rights, absolutely, and land access, absolutely. Because if the politicians, Akil, can send us the whole situation that, look here, we don't have to create a good economy, a manufacturing economy. All we can just keep you laughing and dancing and enjoying your time, right? If we can keep you enslaved like that, then they can do whatever they want to do. And that's why Babsy Grains, she ensures that they have their gala and all of that stuff, and it makes them passive. And they like to see their prime minister coming in his nice SUVs, looking like a king, right? With his wife, Juliet, and they look very regal. And we, wow, I'm the prime minister that, I'm my prime minister that. Leave Andrew alone, right? And then at the end of the day, Andrew Holness is living like in a mansion, in a palace, while the majority of Jamaicans are living in shacks. And that's what they do. So they control our minds, and it's called dopamine or dopamine. They give us all, they allure us with these, cultural artifacts that really don't elevate us to any respectability on the world stage. Because we're not going to be respected if we just produce athletes and music. We are not going to be respected. And we're hearing this now with our hurricane. Oh, everybody likes Jamaica. That's why they're going there to help them. Don't you know that disaster is also money grabbing, right? That they can make money when they go down there and lend their support. I'm not saying now that people, they're not genuine people on the ground. And there are lovers of Jamaica down there, and people love Jamaica and genuinely do, right? But I'm saying to us that we also need to look beyond the superficial, right? It's just like having, you and I can be educated, right? And you have lots of friends, social friends. The moment something comes and affects you, or something happens, something traumatic happens in your life, and you lose everything, your house, your job, your everything, you'll be surprised at many people who just move away from you. The ones whom you thought respected you, right? When you've lost everything, they move away from you. Because in the first place, they never had any respect for you. They were just lauding what you had, your education, your job, your house, your material stuff. But deep down, they never had any regard for you. Because had they had some amount of regard for you, when things went haywire, they would also embrace you, encourage you, motivate you, and continue to respect you. Right? And that's what we're saying now in Jamaica. When we are in a situation like this, and we see we're so poverty stricken, and images coming to the world, blasting to the world, that this, look at these people, right? They're hapless, they're poor, they're black. That's the image that the CNNs and the Foxes would like to send out to the world, and the BBCs, right? About us. Do you think Marcus Garvey would be happy to see us in this position? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Right? But we are happy because once we can have culture, and once we are notorious around the world, and everybody knows Jamaica, everybody knows Usain Bolt, everybody knows Bob Marley. Absolutely, we are happy with that. Now, Kakil is saying that's why this upcoming talk on FBA. Yes, I'm looking forward to it. I'm trying to also invite Mr. Dr. Gerald Horn. I hope you will answer to my email, because he's also a terrific speaker and a terrific historian in the U.S. That's why this upcoming talk on FBA versus continental and diasporic Africans is important. Yeah, and I'm having it this Sunday because people love to talk down on African American culture when they are focusing on other things. And that is true. That is true. Because you know what, Akil? We like to talk about it because we deflect away from our own mental struggles. And if truth be told, we are worse. Why? Because we're living in a situation where we are predominantly black. And psychologically, at least we should have some amount of stamina than African Americans who have, grown up in America under such rigid and austere racism, and yet still many of them have been able to beat the odds. And we live in the Caribbean, where we have blacks everywhere, black lawyers, and we're seeing them, blacks on all posters and billboards and whatever. And yet still we are suffering from mental slavery. We're still suffering from mental slavery, and we're still far behind. And all of the things that we see afflict African Americans, the same things afflict us. It's only more obvious because, as we're saying, in America there are more opportunities, but at the same time, the things that we would not do in our country, we do there in the United States, right? We do it. Right. Now just look at what Akil is saying. The Afro-Americans are living in the belly, absolutely, in the belly of the beast, and so they are always cognizant of how race determines their livelihood. A lot of Jamaicans go to USA and get radicalized, absolutely. And some of us go there and waste our time too, right? We traffic drugs and other things and get distracted, from what we were sent there to do. Right? So yeah, you are right. And I think this is a very important discussion because at a time when we should be reunited, we should be reuniting or uniting. We are coming now and hearing about these FBAs and these ADOS and all of the things, and African and Caribbean blacks. Now we must understand that we are culturally different, and nothing is wrong with that. Nothing is wrong with accepting our differences and similarities. Nothing is wrong with that, right? But when we now begin to say that one is superior or one is inferior, that is where the problem, because differences don't mean inferiority or superiority. Differences just mean that we're different, right? And culturally, that's some of the things you might, your food, your language, the way what you think. Some might listen to more to hip hop, some might listen more to reggae or to dance or to soca, whatever, right? Even Caribbean, even us as Caribbean blacks, we're also different because we have cultural differences. African blacks too, from Caribbean blacks, we're also different because culturally we're different. Nothing is wrong with that. But we have to learn now to come together to understand that to be different does not mean that we have to fight against each other. Yes, I agree that the US black always get on code when they need to get things done. Yes. And I think what has happened too, I have to go shortly, is that when Barack Obama became president, that was when the conversation started growing, Before, there was not so much a conversation about, yeah, we have always had our combats or the conflicts here and there. But when Obama became president, and the whole discourse about his father was African and his mother being a white American, people were saying, well, he's not a descendant of slaves. Barack Obama is, his mother is white and his father is African. And that was when, and afterwards now we saw this very bitter conversations. And then also research done by intellectuals, by scholars, started suggesting that if you look at the black people who attend the Harvards and the Princetons and the Ivy Leagues of the United States, if you check their background, many of them are of African or Caribbean descent. It became even more pronounced. So these are discussions that we have to look at carefully. New daughters say, yes, I agree, yes. So, ladies and gentlemen, what time do you think we have to go? I'm going to go in the next 2 minutes. What time do you think it's best to have the live? Because do you think I'm having it too early on this channel? Do you think it should be earlier? Do you think it should be later? Or do you think this time is excellent? Just to catch more people. Maybe more people are not. Because they're at work or they're at school. I know we have different time zones. What time do you think is best to have the live? This time, at 1 o'clock, 1 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time, or what time Eastern Standard Time? Or if you're also new daughter, you're in Canada, you're in the UK. Yes, thank you. Another excellent lecture. Good night. Yes, good night. 8 p.m. is good for the next live. 8 p.m. that is your time. Okay, and that I would have to check my time, new daughter, what time it is. This time is great. Okay, this time is great. Okay, good. So we'll continue to have the live at this time. And if we can have more people, then I can have it more. 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time would be for my rumination. That's what I have for my rumination news network. So I want another time for my what do you call it now? But what I probably could do is to have the live at 4 p.m. on another day. Yeah, so I'm going to think about that, having at 4 p.m. Eastern and on another day. Don't have it the same day of the rumination. So I will have to have one day, live on, let us on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 4 p.m. Yeah, good. That would be a good thing to do. Right, that's a very good idea. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to now get my video together. The one I'm going to post now is on my Rumination channel. Please go over there and watch it. I'm going to post my video now on the Rumination channel. See you now in another live. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye. Good night.